And Voldemort realizes at this point, when he comes back down the road after I've been left with JD alone for a few minutes, that his uncle had already talked to JD and found him there on the property not too long before us, cutting and doing whatever, and had told him he was on the wrong piece and asked him to move. And I guess they all had words. And his uncle left before it upset him, that type of thing, So we had come down not long after and found JD there ourselves. So then it set Voldemort off again, and he leaves back and forth a few times, calling his mom, who's one of the ones on the deed with the uncle, or whatever, I don't know, property, I don't know. So anyway, JD is mostly arguing the whole time about how he's not moving, this and that, whatever. I think at one point introduces the dog, which is a big thing with him. I did notice that when Voldemort was away, JD would treat me entirely differently. There was something that just kind of slid over. It was very strange. And he would talk to me entirely differently than he would with Voldemort there. And there were points where I was just trying to have a conversation with him. I'm like, look, just trying to get him to be calm enough to hear me out. That it kind of struck me a little wrong. There was one point in there that I did warn him about our children, and in particular in this community, the houses have mostly been built kind of eons ago. People I know online had asked questions about Candace Nims, and it was much larger till right before this. And they'd torn off and were going to rebuild, so that's why it's the size it was. Man, they were just rebuilding an old piece that had been there, and we're getting there. Anyway, so the way it all sits in the properties and houses, especially with the 3 or 4 that are right there, and we can kind of see each other. The bedrooms and things face certain ways. That way, especially the children's aren't, and there's no adult bedrooms facing, so. But there's one particular spot that JD's piece would have come up to meet right next to where, like my daughter's bedroom sort of was. And I did warn JD that if I caught him because I'm not gonna lie, he stroked my stomach a little funny. Funny enough for me to tell him that if I caught him in that spot after dusk doing anything other than mowing, I wasn't gonna ask twice. And I wonder now, all kinds of things, I don't know. But, we did at one point, and after summer went, we knew he was lying to us about certain things. He didn't want to give us his name. The only way we found out his name was at the very end, and after the police were there. There was definitely a mask wearing situation going on with that fella. Because we were backing out in my car, and I thought he was moving by this point, because he couldn't find a place to park. He asked if he could park across the street, and this and the other, and we were like, nope. And there were some weird things, like, I thought it was his health, or he was having, like, breathing problems, but I realized several times that he was sitting on the back of his, blue blazer thing, kind of squatted on it, like, kind of bent over, and I thought he was having, like, health or breathing, or just where he was older problems, not in shape problems. But then it took a couple times for Dad to realize that he was kind of throwing a tantrum. It was like a, and I was like, oh dear. And in between, like, Voldemort coming and going, JD, before his point had, like, he would talk to me. Well, he would ask something of me, whatever he wanted to know, whatever he wanted answered, in a pretty direct, rude manner. Like, I was supposed to answer like that for him, like, on command. And I was trying to stay pretty quiet. But I would answer whatever it was. But when I asked something of him, he wouldn't respond, or it was very strange, like some sort of biblical marriage. The guy definitely has some sort of problem with females. I mean, it's just how I feel about it personally. Definitely some issues there. But after all this transpired, found out he had lied about his age, that sort of thing. When we were backing out, at one point we thought he was backing out too, of in between the no trespassing and gonna do whatever, And instead, because he's sitting on the back of the thing, and we think, well, he's taking a rest for a second. That was not the case, and I was like, whoa, Voldemort, stop the car for just a second. And I kind of was in passenger seat, and the window was rolled down on the driver's, and I was like, are you gonna move? And he was like, no, I'm not, because this is mine, and I just whatever, And I was like, look, no. And Voldemort, so I was like, you know what? Go call the cops, because, like they've said in the media and things, cell phone signal, that sort of thing down there, right? So Voldemort leaves me there again. I'm keeping an eye on JD, and he goes to call the cops. At this point, JD realizes, it was a swap really quick. And he was like, well, could I do this? And could I park there all of a sudden? And could I? And I'm like, what is happening here? Like, he wanted nothing to do with anything. So then he starts packing up what he does have unpacked, which is like a camping grill, charcoal, the dog, cheap dog food. But the whole back of this thing's filled with stuff. I've got pictures that show what all he had in the vehicle that day. And him as well. But his plan was to camp there and squat until, I guess, and he had a picture of like one of the cabins, almost like I had for the cancer treatment, but really small. And inside of this itty bitty folder, it was basically just a picture of GIS data and then one of the prefab cabin things. Sheds, whatever. But at that time, he was just planning on like tent and little grill, dog. I don't know. Starting fires and I don't know. It was weird. So, he packs all this back up with his cans of gas and whatnot, right? And, at least some of it. So then, one of the property owners comes, Voldemort's person, and, we have all the paperwork and things. The cops eventually show up. By this point, JD seems like he's... And he tells us before the cop gets there, we don't have to worry about it. Won't have a neighbor, etc., etc., because Voldemort had offered to buy it, and it's the other from him by this point several times too. And at one point, JD tries to hand the cop the GIS data too, and even the cop was like, and there's the giant survey map that isn't it. And the cop basically tells him that these people have owned the property for X amount of like 200 years. Pretty sure they know where the property lines are, whatever. Which, anyway, so JD's not really interested in giving his name. I don't think anybody ever really even asks for it. then all of a sudden because he told us, like, he had offered the information that he was some sort of vet in, I think, Germany at the time, which didn't really add up with the age he gave us. And then, but he never says that to the cop or anything, and that's usually kind of the first thing. I mean, it's kind of a thing, right? It's usually the first thing that I'm a vet, right? It's one of those things we all know. But I noticed he never mentioned that. That was a little strange. Cop gets there. JD kind of wanders off to himself mostly and really starts packing everything the rest of the way up. Then it seems like, I don't know, he's going to find somewhere else, whatever. Then all of a sudden his personality becomes kind of sweet as pie, and he mentions, something about the wife, and I heard it like the wife stabbed me or wanted to, I don't know. It was a little bizarre. I was standing a little ways off at that point talking to the pseudo mother-in-law person, and so at this point, JD had even mentioned for him he was selling, etc. But then Voldemort asks him, he's like, "Hey, bud, can I get the number or whatever before you take off?" And the mask sort of slips. JD's back's turned at that point to everybody. And JD just kind of screams out in this angry tone, "Why do you need that?" Even the cop stopped and was like, "You just told him you were selling. I mean, like, how's he supposed to get in contact with you?" Voldemort sort of says the same thing at the same time. Then that's how JD's name's sort of learned. The first, anyway. The rest was in the file and accidentally caught by eyesight. The numbers given and exchanged. He makes a big deal of not having anywhere to go. Asks for hotel recommendations that would take a dog. We all tell him, including the officer. And then at one point, he had heard, and this was, sorry, it's a little scattered, but at one point there, right before, somewhere between him and the GIS data and then the survey thing, it seemed like the cop was like, "Well, civil court." And when JD heard that, he got a little excited, like, "Oh, well, so I can squat here and tell," basically. But then I was like, but he cut through lights and things to get in there, and the officer was like, "Oh no, you can't do it. I'm gonna need you to come on back out of there." So at this point, JD knew he had to leave, because, parking somewhere is one thing, cutting through stuff to get to it is another. So, anyway, hold on.